hit was finding out that I had lymphoma when my husband was just fresh out of open heart surgery. I remembered our 1 week follow-up for Mike at our family doctor, and I told her I'd found a lump on my collarbone. She felt it and she thought it was nothing to be too concerned about. She said, you can have lumps on your collarbone. It would be a lymph node, just about a centimeter, and usually no worries. But if I wanted, she'd send me for an ultrasound. So to fast forward, the results of the ultrasound came back saying that it was of significant size and I should go for further testing. She sent me she put in a requisition for a CAT scan and immediately sent me for a chest x-ray. I had no idea why a chest x-ray. But to make a long story short, I had a tumor about the size of a baseball growing in my chest cavity right next to my heart. She said to me, it looks like you have lymphoma. And I thought, oh, isn't that like the worst cancer you could possibly have? Like, isn't that always fatal? Doesn't that always result in you dying? Like, this can't be happening. This isn't real. I just felt surreal. Like, I wasn't even in my body at that point. But then was the first glimmer of hope. In her words, she said, but we've come a long way with treatments for lymphoma. So that was the first thing I could just grasp onto and be able to take the next step. And it seemed, as I look back, that God kept giving those just enough words from people. I remember just being a ball of tears in the oncologist's office. Like, how could this happen to me? I've always been healthy. This, like, my name and cancer shouldn't be in the same sentence. This cannot be real. But it was real. And I remember her handing me a stack of papers with all of the chemo drugs that I would be taking and the possible side effects, and I wouldn't even look at them. I just gave them to Mike. I said, no way, I'm not looking at these. So I could disregard the papers, but I couldn't disregard what the nurse was saying to me. I was going to definitely lose all my hair. I was going to probably lose my eyebrows and my eyelashes. I probably was going to gain weight because of the steroids they were going to put me on. It's like, oh, whoa, this was way too much. I didn't want to deal with all this. But again, the prognosis was very good. So I just remember I put affirmations up around the house that God was going to make the chemo just target the cancer. I was going to come through it and have a wonderful testimony in the end. God knew what I needed and He gave me just enough. And I just want to be so sensitive to people who may have gone through cancer or are facing it. It's different for everybody. Some treatments are mild and some are very, very difficult, but I believe God meets us where He knows our need is, and He gave me what I needed to get through and come out the other side. Maybe it wasn't always pleasant. My stress was high a lot of times. I didn't have the energy level, but God was very gracious, and I'm here to tell the story. I hope I could encourage someone. Thank you.
Good morning. Just before I begin, thinking of Keith, he doesn't only carry a guitar. In the next picture you'll see, he was away last weekend, and there's what he's carrying. Hulk, yeah. Where is he? Where are you, Keith? Is he? How much did you lift last weekend? 500 pounds. Wow. Good for you. So don't mess with Keith. Okay? He's a hidden resource in this church. And we've been doing a series on hitting the wall. We'll do it today, and next week will be the last. And encourage you to pick up one of the books at the back, Hitting the Wall. They're $20. But I would say if you can't afford that, put in what you can. And if you can't afford anything, I'd like you to take one. More important than the money is that this book get into your hands. I wrote it because I believed it's something that will touch your life and help you. And I think every week between this and Run, I hear from somebody, many people I don't know, who've read one of the books and their life has been impacted. And so I would like you to have a copy. You can pay for it, pay for part of it, or you can have it free. They're at the back, and that would be my gift to you. So please make sure that you go with one today, and you'll have the copy of all these messages in your library and hopefully in your heart. Meeting God at the wall. You know, back in the days of a king called Ahab. Ahab was a wicked king. He even had a more wicked wife. Her name was Jezebel, and they had turned God's people far away from God. So God finally came down, and he said, there's going to be no rain for 3 years. And he sent a prophet by the name of Elijah to tell Ahab that. That's like going to the leader of the Taliban and saying, you don't like him. You know what to expect. Or you disagree with his policies. And Elijah did that, and it did not rain. And in an agricultural society, that is disastrous. Famine happens. There was famine for 3 years, and Elijah was hiding out as King Ahab's men were coming after him, looking for him. Elijah, of course, was the one being blamed by King Ahab. And after a 3-year period, God finally said to Elijah, he said, Elijah, go to King Ahab and tell him to meet me on Mount Carmel. This is Mount Carmel, looking down into the valley of Jezreel, or what we know today as Armageddon. But standing over Armageddon is this mountain. It's called Carmel. And Elijah told Ahab to meet him with all of the prophets of Baal and all the prophets of Asherah, and to stand up there. There were 850 prophets in all that met with him up on top of Mount Carmel, and as many people as they could get up there. I call this story now the showdown at OK Carmel. Elijah made the rules very simple. He says, you take your prophets and they can pray as long as they want today, and pray that the God of their God, Baal, will send down fire and lick up their sacrifice here. Build an altar. Don't light it. Let your God light it. He says, then I will do the same, and we will discover today whose God is the true God. And so the prophets, they began to dance, and they cut themselves, and they danced, and they cut themselves again, and they did all kinds of this and that, dancing around, trying to get the attention of their God as they prayed for him to send down fire from heaven. And nothing happened. So they continued to dance and cut themselves, and Elijah began to taunt them. He began to say, maybe he's on vacation. Shout louder. Maybe he's in the Caribbean. Maybe he's sitting on the toilet. That's what he said. Call louder. And he's taunting them, and they're getting more and more worked up. Finally, Elijah said, enough is enough. Stop. And he went over to the place where there had been a sacrifice, or there had been an altar of God. He rebuilt it. He had them douse it with water. The water was running everywhere around it. And then he said to everyone, stand back. And he got down on his knees and just prayed, God, prove that you're the God of gods. I remember the last time I told this story, it was up on Mount Carmel, just to the side of this statue of Elijah. And just as I said that, 2 Israeli jets flew over. It was just absolutely deafening, and it was creepy. Everybody's looking around for fire from heaven, you know, and I was sort of as well. What's God doing here? It surely had the impact right on cue. They flew over, and we didn't get the fire. But on that one particular day they did. The fire came down from heaven, and it licked up the flames. That same day, well, before that day was over, Elijah had the prophets of Baal and Asherah taken down the mountain, and they were slaughtered. And that day it began to rain. But that wasn't the end of the story. That was probably the pinnacle of Elijah's ministry. One of the greatest times in his life. One of the stories we all know about in the Bible. But it wasn't the end, was it? Turn with me, please, to 1 Kings chapter 19. And you can read the whole story in chapter 17 and 18. But let's read on to see what happened next. Chapter 19, verse 1. When Ahab got home, he told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, including the way he had killed all the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah. May the gods strike me and even kill you if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you, just as you have killed them. And Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. Can you imagine this? The champion of Carmel disintegrates. This great man of God has hit the wall, and it's like everything begins to fall apart. The lion heart becomes a faint heart. The faith that he had becomes fear. Fear of man, fear of Jezebel, fear of the circumstances, fear of the future, and he fled. It's hard to believe that it's the same guy. He flees. Verse 4, then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He hits the wall of depression. You know about that wall? One thing depression does is it tries to isolate you. So I'm not surprised it says he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. And he sat down under a solitary broom tree and he prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. Depression means you have no energy. There's nothing left. Nothing left to give. I've given it all. There's no interest. You feel useless. You feel hopeless. You feel joyless. Lifeless. You feel rejected. You feel alone. Again, depression tends to want to isolate you from everyone else so that you feel alone. You just want to retreat because it just won't stop raining. It's raining all the time. Even some have thoughts of suicide. Elijah actually did. He just wants to die. And God comes to him at the wall. And he meets him at the wall. Verse 5, he lay down and slept under the broom tree, but as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him to get up and eat. Elijah, hey, wake up. I've got some food for you. He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on some hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. See, God comes to him and assures him of his presence. And he assures him of his provision. Even when you feel isolated, you're not alone because God is with you. And he says, I will provide for you. He knows our human frailty. Notice here in depression, the physical component of recovery. He needed his sleep. He needed some good food to sustain him. And so God supplies that. You might need medical attention. You will need personal attention. It's not something you let go. You need to pay attention to it. And God is here to pay attention for him. He goes another 40 days actually down into the wilderness further, down into the Sinai desert. Boy, he's getting away as far as he can. He's getting as far away as it is possible. In verse 10, down there in Sinai, God comes to him again and he said, I'm here, Elijah. Now what's going on? My prophet. Elijah, your name means the Lord is God. What's going on? And it starts to pour out. Verse 10, Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets, and I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. I am so alone. Everything I've done to you has failed. Interesting that he's saying that right after the showdown of OK Carmel. And the results of that. I failed. And I'm the only one here, God, that wants to serve you. I'm the only one that's interested in worshiping you. I'm the only one in the entire country who loves you and follows you and obeys you. You know, the healthy side of depression, of the wall of adversity, is that it brings you face to face with yourself, your own frailty, your own need. How we like to feel in control. The wall says you're not in control. It's only an illusion. And it also brings you face to face with God. And God said, "Go out and stand before me on the mountain," the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by. And a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. But the Lord, and the earthquake, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. You know, there's certain things that happen in our lives, we think, well, that's got to be God. Make sure you're listening to the right things. He wasn't in the things that you would have thought God was in. An earthquake. Oh, what is God saying? A wind that blows the rocks apart. What is God saying here? Surely God is in a tornado, but God wasn't there. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. Oh, the whisper. It's sometimes so soft, you're going to miss it. Sometimes we're so busy looking for the earthquake and for the fire. Sometimes we're so busy looking for the tornado and the big things God is going to say to us, and we don't hear the whisper. David, Steve, Beth. Elijah. And Elijah heard it. He wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And the voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here?" He replied again, "I have been zealously serving the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets, and I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me." And then the Lord told him, "Elijah, go back the same way you came, and travel to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive there, anoint Hazael to be king of Aram, and anoint Jehu, grandson of Nimshi, to be king of Israel, and anoint Elisha of Shaphat from the town of Abel-Meholah, and to replace you as my prophet." Elijah, my presence, you're not alone. My provision, I'm providing for you. Purpose, I've got things for you to do yet. Not down here in the Sinai desert, but back up where you came from. He gives him 3 things. You're going to anoint 2 kings. You're going to anoint somebody to actually take over your ministry. You see, life is not over until God's purpose for your life is over. Do you hear that? Your purpose, even when you feel alone, even when you feel like you have no purpose, if you're still here, it means that God is saying, I have a purpose for your life. I have a reason for you. And then perspective, verse 18, "Yet I'll preserve 7,000 others in Israel who have never bowed down to Baal or kissed him." Elijah, you're not alone. There's 7,000 of you that haven't bowed the knee. Perspective, you know, when you look through the eyes of the human predicament, there's not much light. There's not. But when you look at things through the lens of God, see, what lens are you looking through? When you put on the lens of faith that sees God, you see his presence and his provision and his purpose, and you're given perspective. That is wisdom, when you're able to see things through the eyes of God, from God's perspective, and you realize that you're not alone. There are others. There are others. I can remember one time, years back, about 10, 12 years into our ministry, and I had hit one of those real walls. I've hit the wall, I would say, specifically twice. This was the second time. And there was a lot of slander, there was a lot of abuse, pastoral abuse going on. I knew that. I didn't know who to talk. I had no one to talk to, no one to pray with. And so I just knew that I had to get away. I had to get away before I felt too alone. And when self-pity starts to set in, and feeling angry, feeling disillusioned, all those nasty things. I didn't want to go to church, and that's a problem when you're the pastor. I found myself doing everything because I had to, because of who I was. So we decided to go on a holiday out west. I thought I'll get as far away as I can. So we traveled west, traveled Overton to Vancouver Island, coming back, we came through the States, and we were coming on a Sunday morning. We were going to a place that I really wanted to see. It was the place where, it's called the Little Bighorn, where Custer was massacred. 240 soldiers had been massacred by the Sioux Indians under Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, and I just knew my family would want to see this place. So I thought, I'll take them. And I was excited. And as we were heading in through Montana, Diane turns to me and she says, "Wouldn't it be nice to go to church today as a family?" And I felt this cold shiver go up my back. I said nothing. And I was so thankful. There were no towns we were going through. And if there's no towns, there's no church. All I could see was grass and tumbleweed. So there was rather that, in a marriage, sometimes you have that awkwardness. All morning it was kind of awkward. I knew what she wanted, and I knew what I didn't want. I spend my life at church. That's the last place I want to be right now. It's Sunday morning. We're on the prairies. We're in Montana. Enjoy this. So we drove, and we drove, and we drove, and finally we got to the place. We were going to camp overnight and get up the next morning, go and visit the historical battlefield and for that day. And as we were driving close to the area, there was a big sign, "Welcome to the Crow Native Reserve." And as we're driving into this little community, over on the left was this huge casino with all the lights flashing and the big sign. It was amazing. And just beside it, about maybe a couple of 100 yards to the right, there was this little tent with a big sign over the top saying, "Revival Meetings." And Diane said, "There's our church." And the kids said, "Yeah, let's go to church in a tent." And I felt trapped. I felt a bit ambushed. Have you ever been far away and God seems to ambush you? So I agreed. By the time we had our tent and everything set up, it was about 9 o'clock, and I thought, the service is going to be over by now. So we went and we checked out the little office where we were camping. We said, "By the way, the tent meeting's over there. Do you know anything about it? It's 9 o'clock. They're probably over with." And the person said, No, they've been going for 3 or 4 hours now. They'll go for 3 or 4 hours more. I still felt trapped. So over we trot. And at this tent, there were all kinds of half-tons all the way around, and Native people in and up on top of the cabs, and the little tent meeting, and that little tent, or that fairly good-sized tent, it was about 3/4 the size of this room here, and it was just jam-packed full of Native people. And we looked in and we looked at the back, and there at the back was a few seats in the very back row. I thought, just where I want to be. So we thought, we'll go in there and kind of hide. Try and hide when you're 5 white people in a room full of dark Indian people. So we went and sat in the back. And they sang and they sang, and there were 4 native pastors preaching and leading. They were doing everything. They were the band, they were the prayed, they preached, they did everything. And after about an hour and a half of this, I whispered down the row, okay, I think it's time to go. So we were just planning our escape. And everybody stood and started to sing a chorus that I just love. So we stayed there for that. You know, we are standing, you remember this? On holy ground. And I know that there are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus now, for we are standing in his presence on holy ground. And when it was over, I said, okay, go. And just as we stood to go, one of the native pastors got up and he said, everybody stay where you are. Trying to stay under the radar. It was a hot building, a hot tent. It was going to get a lot hotter. Suddenly that preacher pointed his finger right at me in the back row. And he said, I don't know who you are. I don't know who you're running from, but God has a word for you. Well, I'd heard many messages before, but I'd never had someone that direct. Especially pointing me out in the whole building. And it got worse. He got down off the platform like this. And he started toward me, coming down the aisle. And he said again, I don't know who you are or what you've done. I felt like a serial killer. Every eye was on me. Everybody else thought I was a serial killer. I looked over and Diane's eyes were as wide as saucers. My kids looked traumatized. I didn't know what to do. And he came down toward me and I could feel the blood just draining out of my head. Again, you talk about feeling ambushed by God. And he opened his Bible. Do you ever feel stalked by somebody? Do you ever have a time in your life when you felt like somebody pressed the pause button on your life and everything just stood still? And he's walking toward me. And he opens his Bible that what I knew was Romans 8. And he got very close to me. He kept coming like this. I'm praying, stop. God, stop this man. I knew what had happened to the last white guy that was in position in this land, in this part of the country. He got this far away from me. And he said this. He began to ask a series of questions. What shall we say about such wonderful things as this? If God is for us, who can ever be against us? Have you ever felt like somebody was against you? Everything in me wanted to shout, yes! The whole world! That's why I'm here, to get away. But I decided the best plan of retreat was agreement. I said, well, as he said, is anyone against you? No. And then he read, if God is for you, who can ever be against you? No one, I said to him. Then he went on to verse 32. He says, since he did not even spare his own son for you, but gave him up for you, won't he also give you everything else? Won't he give you everything you need? Still, I'm thinking plan of retreat, agreement. I said, yes, he will. Do you believe that? Oh, yes. Yes. Please go. He didn't go. Do you feel accused by any man? By now, I'm starting to feel something in here. Tears, and anger. I thought, this guy has entered my space uninvited, so I will enter his space. And I said to him as clearly as I said, as a matter of fact, I do feel accused. I do. I thought, he's going to shout at me. I will shout. I do. I feel maliciously accused. I feel maligned. I feel done. I'm tired. I want to quit. I can't go on. You talk to me about accusation, I said. I could teach you about accusation. And we get into this discussion. It's like it's just him and me. I'd forgotten about everybody else. Just me talking with this, what seemed like a messenger from heaven. He didn't give up. He kept pursuing me. Who dares accuse you when God has chosen you for his own? Who would accuse you, he said, if God is the one who has chosen you? Did man choose you or God choose you? And if God has chosen you, then who dares accuse you? He said, no one. He said, say that. And I said, no one. Didn't believe it. He said, say it again. No one. No one. For God himself has given us right standing with himself. And the first time I saw him smile. Who will condemn you? I looked at him. He said, who will condemn you? I said, everyone who wants to. He says, it says here, no one. No one. Say it. No one. No one, I said. We had this no one thing going on. He said, for Christ Jesus died for you, and he was raised for you, and he is sitting in the place of honor, God pleading for you. He says he died for you, he rose for you, and he's pleading for you in heaven today. So who has the right to condemn you? I said, no one. No one. And I can remember him getting down real close. Get in your space? Yeah. He got down real close. I just remember that azure skin, brown skin. Got down in my ear like this. And he read these verses. He said, can anyone ever separate you from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves you when you have trouble? Do you think even the trouble that you have means that God doesn't love you? He was whispering in my ear. And the tears began to just stream down my face. And I had this true sense that I was in the presence of God. I had come thousands of miles to get away. And here in the middle of nowhere, God ambushed me. And he had something directly for me, from somebody I'd never met, who it was like he just knew everything about me. And I knew that I was in the presence of God. And I was on sacred ground. You know, when you hit the wall, it's not something that happens against you or to you. It's something that happens for you. And you need to remember that it's at that time God will speak to you like no other time. It's at that time that you'll feel his presence like no other time. And you will know that you are truly on holy ground. And there are angels all around. And it's time to, as we were singing, to praise Jesus now, for you're standing in his presence on holy ground. And so, at the wall, stand silently. Listen attentively. Because you may find that at the very worst time in your life is the very best time in your life, the very time that God has appointed to speak to you like no other time. You are on holy ground. It's time to take your shoes off and say, God, I give up. This really is all about you. We just bow our heads. I'd like you to just take a moment and let God speak to you. Just you and God, like you're sitting in this room, just with him.
Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love, your love, your love, your love. Your love never fails, never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. Stand together as we acknowledge it. On and on. And on and on and on and on it goes. And it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. 'Cause there's one thing remains. This one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Oh, your love, your love, your love, oh God, oh, your love, your love, your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid, there's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Oh, your love, your love, your love, oh Lord, oh, your love, your love, your love, oh Lord.
So each week during the Wall series, we've wanted to open the front of the church and create two atmospheres. And one is for you to come forward and share your heart and allow us to support you in prayer. And you may not realize how surrounded you are this morning if you just need that expression, that time for someone to pray for you or just to speak out loud what's going on in your heart. I'm looking at, Cam and Judy have seen God move in the Settles and Hoovers, and Jim's back there, Les and the elders, and those of us that have had these opportunities to see God move, Sandy and Steve even, and more and more. What a great group to be in if you want to share your heart this morning. So come forward at any time. The front of the church is open to you. And the cafe is open as well. And in the cafe, share what God's done in your heart. Make that a room of celebration back there. There's cake and cookies and drinks and Steve. And you can celebrate God moving. And if it's your need is that you want to have some prayer and some support, then come to the front. And if you have a story to tell or you want to hear a story, go to the cafe. And let's have this moment of prayer together in the closing time of our service. So come forward. We're here waiting for you. Some of those names I mentioned, you can come and help me pray for those that come forward now. So come.